The desert was silent in a way that made men uneasy. Not the peaceful silence of sleep, but the heavy, watching silence that pressed against the ears as if the land itself was holding its breath. The Nevada desert had swallowed many things before: men, dreams, gold, truth. But on one scorching afternoon in the late 1800s, it swallowed something so completely that not even a shadow was left behind. A full stagecoach, 6 passengers, 2 guards, a driver with 20 years of desert experience, and a locked iron chest rumored to hold enough gold to change lives forever. It vanished. No wreckage, no bodies, no blood, no wheel tracks fading into sand, just nothing. And that nothing would haunt the American West for generations. People still ask the same question more than a century later. How does a stagecoach disappear in the open desert? Not in a canyon, not in a storm, not near hostile territory, but on a well-traveled route, under a burning sun, between 2 towns that both swore the coach never arrived. Some say the desert took it. Some say men did. Others whisper that something far stranger happened that day, something the West was never meant to understand. This is not just a story of missing gold. It is a story of fear, of innocence meeting cruelty, of men pushed to desperation, of silence louder than gunfire, and of a mystery so perfect that even time failed to erase it. Welcome to Untold Golden History. Today, we journey back to a Nevada where law was thin, greed was thick, and the desert decided who lived and who vanished without explanation. In the late 1870s, Nevada was a land in transition. The silver boom had transformed quiet desert towns into chaotic hubs of fortune seekers. Stagecoaches were lifelines, carrying mail, passengers, supplies, and most dangerously of all, gold and silver bullion. Every stagecoach route was mapped, every stop was known, every mile had been traveled thousands of times, which is why what happened next made no sense. The coach departed from a mining settlement just after sunrise. The sky was clear, no storms, no unusual reports. The driver, a man named Elias Crow, was known across 3 counties as cautious, steady, and sober, rare qualities in the Wild West. He had refused risky runs before. He had turned back during bad weather. He had survived ambush attempts. That morning, nothing felt wrong. The horses were calm. The guards checked their rifles. Passengers joked about the heat and the dust. Inside the coach were ordinary people chasing extraordinary hopes. A school teacher heading east to see family she hadn't hugged in 5 years. A gambler riding his last chance out of town. A prospector who believed his luck had finally turned. A quiet woman dressed in black whose purpose no one knew. 2 businessmen escorting a locked chest sealed with government markings. Gold had a way of changing the air around it. Men spoke softer, eyes lingered longer, trust thinned. Still, the route was considered safe, too safe for what came next. By midday, the heat became brutal. The desert stretched endlessly, sand, rock, scrub brush, and shimmering mirages that made distant hills appear to float. The horses slowed, foam gathering at their mouths. Crow adjusted his hat and squinted ahead. Nothing moved. No riders, no dust clouds, no signs of trouble. The stagecoach passed its final known landmark, a crooked stone formation locals called the Devil's Fingers. That was the last confirmed sighting. When the stagecoach failed to arrive at the next station by nightfall, concern was mild. Delays were common. When it failed to arrive by morning, concern turned to fear. By the second night, fear became dread. Sheriffs were notified, riders were dispatched, telegraph lines buzzed with confusion. The stagecoach had vanished between 2 points less than 40 miles apart. 40 miles of open desert. Men searched the trail. They found nothing. No broken wheels, no bloodstains, no empty cartridges, no wheel tracks leaving the route. Even the wagon ruts, the deep, unmistakable lines carved by iron-rimmed wheels, simply ended, as if the stagecoach had been lifted straight into the sky. Search parties expanded. Experienced trackers, men who could read a footprint like a book, were brought in. They studied the ground for days. Their conclusion terrified everyone. There was no struggle, one tracker said quietly. No ambush, no chase, no turnoff. Another whispered, "It's like the desert erased them." The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly, but the chill spreading through the searchers had nothing to do with temperature. The West understood violence, it understood greed, it understood death. But this was something else. Rumors ignited faster than brush fires. Some claimed the gold had attracted a perfectly planned outlaw attack, so flawless it left no trace, but even the most skilled gangs left signs. Others believed the driver betrayed everyone, turning the coach over to criminals in exchange for a share. Yet no outlaw ever spent that gold. No sudden fortunes appeared. No new ranches were bought. No legends of a great robbery surfaced. The gold vanished with the coach, and that silence was louder than any confession. Then came the stories no sheriff wanted to hear. Stories of strange lights seen in the desert at dusk. Stories of winds that whispered names. Stories of travelers hearing wagon wheels where no road existed. Older Paiute elders spoke quietly of lands where people were taken between moments. Their warnings were ignored. The West did not believe in such things until it had no other explanation. Weeks passed. Searchers began finding other things instead. A dropped glove half buried in sand, never confirmed to belonging to any passenger. A torn strip of fabric caught on a thorn bush, no blood on it. A single horseshoe, far from the trail, as if carried there. Each discovery raised hope. Each one led to nowhere. Families waited in agony. Letters were written and never answered. Money was spent on prayers instead of meals. Children asked why their parents hadn't come home. No bodies meant no funerals, and no funerals meant no closure. Sheriff Thomas Hale, a man hardened by lynch mobs and gunfights, reportedly sat alone in his office one night and wept. "I can't protect people from nothing." That sentence would follow him to his grave. Years passed. The desert reclaimed the trail. Towns shrank. Mines dried up. Witnesses died. But the mystery didn't fade. Instead, it deepened. Some claimed the stagecoach appeared on the horizon decades later, rolling silently, empty, before dissolving into heat waves. Others swore they heard screams when the wind shifted just right. Historians argue, skeptics scoff, but no one has ever explained how a stagecoach and everyone in it could disappear so completely. No proof of death, no proof of escape, no proof of crime, just absence. And sometimes absence is the most terrifying thing of all, because it leaves room for every fear the human mind can imagine. And the Nevada desert, it never tells its secrets, not willingly. Long before the desert swallowed the stagecoach, every soul inside it had already begun a journey of their own, and none of them knew they were riding toward history's most perfect disappearance. Elias Crow had driven stagecoaches since he was 16. He had watched boys turning to killers over spilled whiskey. He had watched honest men sell their souls for silver dust. He had buried friends beneath shallow desert graves marked only by stones and silence. Crow trusted patterns. The desert, he believed, followed rules. Cruel ones, but rules nonetheless. That morning, something felt off. Not enough to turn back, just enough to linger. As the horses pulled the coach forward, Crow felt the weight of eyes on his back. He glanced at the horizon again and again, expecting to see dust rising for riders who were not there. Inside the coach, tension brewed quietly. The school teacher, Margaret Ellis, clutched a small leather book to her chest. Inside it were pressed flowers and letters, some faded, some unread for years. She had left behind a Nevada town that no longer felt safe after her brother vanished in a mining collapse no one investigated properly. She believed this journey east would bring peace. It would bring answers. She had no idea she would never reach either. Across from her sat Caleb Monroe, a gambler with shaking hands and eyes too alert to ever truly rest. Caleb owed money to men who did not forgive, men who tracked debts across state lines, men who believed fear was the only honest currency. This stagecoach was his escape. If he reached the next city, he planned to disappear into a new name. Ironically, he would vanish far sooner. The prospector, Henry Pike, smelled of dust and desperation. He had struck a vein of gold so small it barely justified celebration, but to him it meant survival. He planned to sell his claim, return home, and die where his wife was buried. He spoke little, but when he looked at the locked chest beneath the coach, something dark flickered behind his eyes. Gold did that to men. Then there was the woman in black. She gave her name as Eleanor Graves. She spoke only when spoken to. She kept her gloves on, even in the heat, and she never slept. Margaret noticed Eleanor whispering once, late in the afternoon, her lips moving without sound, praying, perhaps, or remembering. The two businessmen were government escorts, though no one used that word aloud. Samuel Price and Arthur Vane had papers stamped with seals most people never saw. They avoided eye contact, spoke in low tones, and checked the locked chest more often than necessary. Inside it was not just gold, it was proof. Proof of illegal land seizures, proof of bribes tied to mining rights, proof that powerful men had built fortunes on buried lives. That chest was dangerous, more dangerous than anyone realized. The guards sensed it. They kept their rifles close. They scanned the desert obsessively. One of them muttered under his breath, "This run feels cursed." No one laughed. As the sun climbed higher, the desert changed. The air shivered violently, bending distance and warping sound. Horses snorted nervously. A sudden gust of wind carried sand across the trail in sharp, stinging waves. Crow slowed the team. That was when he saw it. Tracks, but not stagecoach tracks. Footprints, barely visible, leading parallel to the trail, keeping pace. Crow's hand tightened on the reins. "Anyone else see that?" he called back. No answer. When he looked again, the tracks were gone. Inside the coach, Margaret felt a sudden pressure in her ears, as if descending rapidly. Eleanor Graves pressed her gloved hands together and closed her eyes. Caleb Monroe whispered, "No, no, not here." Henry Pike stared at the floor. The desert wind rose, then died just as suddenly. Silence returned, too complete. Crow urged the horses forward. He should have stopped. He should have turned back. But patterns told him nothing was wrong. And sometimes, trusting patterns is how men die. Miles later, the road ended. Not abruptly, not dramatically. It simply faded. The hardened dirt softened into untouched sand. The wagon ruts thinned, then vanished altogether. Crow pulled hard on the reins. "Halt!" The horses stopped, confused. The guards jumped down. One of them swore loudly. There ain't no road. That was impossible. This trail had existed for decades. Crow dismounted and stepped forward. The ground ahead was smooth, as if no wheel had ever touched it. Behind them, the trail still existed. Ahead, nothing. Panic bloomed quietly.
Price demanded they turn back. Vane argued they should wait. The guards scanned the horizon, rifles shaking. Eleanor Graves spoke for the first time without being addressed. "This is where it happens." Her voice was calm, too calm. Margaret asked, "What happens?" Eleanor did not answer. Then the sound came, wheels, rolling, but not theirs, from everywhere, from nowhere. Caleb screamed. The horses reared, eyes rolling white. The air grew heavy, pressing down like an unseen weight. Sand lifted into slow spirals that defied the wind. Crow tried to shout orders, but his voice felt distant, swallowed before it reached his own ears. Time bent. Moments stretched. Heartbeats echoed like gunshots. Margaret saw her childhood home. Henry Pike smelled his wife's hair. Caleb felt coins spilling through his fingers. The guards fired blindly, but no shots echoed. Eleanor removed one glove. Her hand was scarred with old burns. "This debt is paid," she whispered. And then, nothing. No explosion, no scream, no violence, just absence. When the searchers later arrived, they would find no signs of struggle, because there had not been one. The stagecoach did not crash, it did not burn, it did not flee, it was not stolen. It was erased, as if reality itself had closed around it and sealed the wound. Years later, a Paiute elder would say, "Some places are doors, and some doors close." No historian would write that down, but the desert remembered. And sometimes, when the wind is right, it still does.
The first men who went looking for the stagecoach believed in answers. They believed in tracks, in logic, in cause and effect. By the time they returned, some of them no longer believed in anything at all. The initial search party consisted of 12 men, sheriffs, trackers, ranch hands, and 2 former soldiers who had survived battles far bloodier than anything the desert had ever thrown at them. They followed the route slowly, methodically. They expected signs, broken brush, spent cartridges, dragged bodies, blood darkened by sun. They found none. The trail simply ended, cleanly, unnaturally, like a sentence cut off mid-word. One tracker, Jonah Reed, dropped to his knees and ran his fingers through the sand. "No wind did this," he said quietly. "No storm." Another man laughed nervously. "Then what did?" Reed didn't answer. He couldn't. They expanded the search outward in widening circles. Days passed. Water ran low. Tempers flared. Men argued over directions, over maps that suddenly felt useless. At night, the desert changed. The stars burned brighter than any sky the men had known, pressing down with a weight that made sleep impossible. Some claimed they heard voices just beyond the firelight, calling names only they would recognize. One man fired into the darkness. Nothing answered. On the 4th night, one of the former soldiers, Private Edwin Moore, began screaming in his sleep. He woke clawing at his own throat, begging for air. "They're still inside," he gasped. "They're still riding." No one asked who. Sheriff Hale ordered a second, larger search. This time, the federal government took interest, and that alone changed everything. 2 men arrived from the east, wearing clean coats and unreadable expressions. They said they were surveyors. They carried no surveying equipment. They asked questions that had nothing to do with geography. What exactly was in the chest? Who knew about it? Who last saw the woman in black? Hale felt a cold realization settle in his gut. The stagecoach was never just a stagecoach. Records began disappearing. Telegraph messages went unanswered. Witness statements were quietly rewritten, and the phrase, "routine loss due to desert conditions," appeared in official correspondence. That phrase infuriated the families. Desert conditions did not erase iron wheels. Margaret Ellis's sister arrived from the east, demanding answers. She camped outside the sheriff's office for 3 days. On the 4th, she vanished from town without explanation. Some said she was escorted away. Others said she was warned. No one ever heard from her again. As weeks turned into months, the search became something darker. Not a hunt, a vigil. Men returned to the desert not because they believed they would find the stagecoach, but because something pulled them back. Jonah Reed returned alone one evening, face pale, eyes hollow. "I found it," he said. "Found what?" Hale asked. Reed swallowed hard. "The place where it remembers." They followed him at dawn. The location lay miles off the known route, a circle of sand unnaturally smooth. No plants grew there, no insects moved. Sound felt wrong, as if swallowed a few feet from the ear. Hale stepped forward and felt his stomach twist. He smelled leather, fresh, impossible. One of the men dropped to his knees and vomited. Another began crying without understanding why. There were no tracks, but there were impressions. Shallow, wrong, as if something very heavy had rested there briefly, and then ceased to exist. That night, Hale received a letter, no return address. Inside was a single line written in careful ink. The chest was never meant to arrive. Below it, a government seal. Slowly, the truth began to surface, not fully, never cleanly, but enough to terrify those who glimpsed it. The gold shipment was a cover. Inside the chest were documents tying high-ranking officials to forced land removals, staged mining accidents, and the deliberate poisoning of water sources to drive communities away, including indigenous communities, including towns that had vanished quietly from maps. Eleanor Graves had not been a passenger by chance. She was the last surviving witness to a massacre disguised as a mining collapse. Her family had been buried alive. The scars on her hands were from digging. She had sworn the truth would never be delivered into corrupt hands. Some believed she made a deal. Others believed she opened a door she didn't understand. But the realization was unavoidable. This was not random. This was consequence. Men who participated in the cover-ups began dying. Accidents, officially. A fall downstairs, a gun misfire, a sudden illness. No 2 deaths were alike, but each man had signed a document tied to that chest. People whispered the word no one wanted to say aloud. Karma. Years later, a retired government clerk confessed on his deathbed. There are places we marked, places where experiments failed, places where reality thinned. He refused to say more. He died that night. The Nevada desert gained a reputation. Stage routes shifted. Travelers avoided certain miles even when it cost them days. And sometimes riders reported something impossible. A stagecoach on the horizon, silent, empty, rolling without horses, until heat swallowed it whole. Sheriff Hale retired early. On his final day, he buried a box beneath the desert sand. Inside were copies of documents he had stolen before they disappeared. No one knows where that box lies. Some believe it cannot be found. Some believe it will only reveal itself when it is meant to. The mystery never closed. It didn't fade. It waited.
Time did what it always did best. It moved forward, relentlessly. And yet, the mystery of the vanished stagecoach refused to be left behind. By the early 1900s, Nevada no longer resembled the wild land it once was. Railroads cut through deserts like scars. Towns grew, then died, then were forgotten. Children learned history from books that preferred clean endings. But some families lived with an ending that never came. Margaret Ellis's name remained on a list titled Missing, Presumed Dead. No body, no grave, no date of death.
Her mother died, still setting a place for her at the table. Her students grew old, remembering the woman who taught them to write letters they never sent. Absence became inheritance. Caleb Monroe's debts were never forgiven. The men who hunted him turned their cruelty toward his younger brother instead. A man beaten for another man's sins. A family broken by a disappearance that solved nothing. Henry Pike's gold claim was seized by the state within months. No next of kin appeared to contest it. The land was quietly sold. The gold it produced funded buildings with plaques that never mentioned his name. And Eleanor Graves? She became a rumor among rumors. Some said she was a witch. Some said a martyr. Some she never existed at all. But indigenous communities remembered her differently, as a woman who listened, as a woman who carried names of the dead, as a woman who understood that truth, when buried too long, becomes something else entirely. In 1912, a railroad worker named Thomas Avery stumbled upon something strange while laying track near an abandoned stretch of desert. The ground felt hollow, not soft, hollow. When they dug, they found nothing solid, just cold air rushing upward. The foreman ordered the site filled and sealed. No report was filed. But Avery never slept again. He claimed he could hear wheels beneath the earth. Decades later, during the Great Depression, desperate men wandered the desert looking for work, for food, for hope. Some wandered into the wrong places. One man returned to town barefoot, eyes wide, repeating a single sentence, "They're still waiting." He was committed to an asylum. The doctors wrote, "Desert delirium." They always did. By the 1940s, the federal government had learned something it would never admit publicly. Certain locations defied explanation. Instruments malfunctioned, compass needles spun, sound behaved unpredictably, maps were altered, restricted zones appeared where nothing official existed. And one such zone matched the last known search coordinates of the vanished Stagecoach. During World War II, military engineers conducted tests nearby, explosives, shock waves, ground-penetrating surveys. They found anomalies they could not classify. One internal memo stated, "Area exhibits spatial inconsistency. Recommend abandonment." The memo was buried. The area was fenced. The desert remained. Generations passed. The story thinned into legend. Then something unexpected happened. In 1978, a graduate student named Rebecca Hale began researching unsolved disappearances of the American West. She was not chasing ghosts, she was chasing patterns. And she noticed something historians had missed. Every person linked to the Stagecoach disappearance, passenger, guard, official, witness, shared one thing. Their stories ended abruptly. Careers cut short, families fractured, records altered, as if proximity alone had consequences. Rebecca Hale was Sheriff Thomas Hale's granddaughter. She found his journals hidden in a false wall behind an old bookshelf. Inside were names, dates, places that no longer appeared on maps, and one final entry written in a trembling hand. We thought we were hiding the truth, but we were only hiding from it. She followed the trail back into the desert, against warnings, against permits, against common sense. The place felt wrong the moment she arrived. Her equipment failed, her watch stopped, her footsteps sounded delayed. Then she saw it, a depression in the sand, perfectly oval, unmarked by wind, unchanged by time. She felt grief rush through her without knowing why. She whispered names. The wind answered. Rebecca did not find bones. She did not find gold. What she found was worse.
She found certainty, that something had been taken, not destroyed, that silence had been chosen over justice, that history had been edited. When she attempted to publish her findings, funding vanished. Her advisor withdrew support overnight. Her files were seized for review. She received a call with no voice on the other end, just breathing. She knew then that the mystery was not old, it was active. Years later, fragments leaked, documents surfaced. Not enough for court, enough for doubt, enough for shame. People began asking questions again. Why were certain desert zones unmarked? Why were indigenous land claims tied to missing records? Why did some truths require erasure? The story returned, not as legend, as accusation. The Nevada desert remained unchanged, but people were not. They began listening. An elderly Paiute woman spoke at a university once. She said, "Some stories disappear because they are stolen. Others disappear because they are protected. This one was both." She paused. Nothing that carries pain forever stays hidden. The stagecoach never returned, but its absence reshaped lives. It forced a reckoning. It planted doubt in official narratives. It reminded a nation that progress often rolled forward on buried suffering. And the desert, it kept its promise to remember.
By the early 2000s, the world had changed. Satellites watched the Earth from above. Data was stored in clouds instead of filing cabinets. History no longer lived only in books. It lived in servers, archives, and leaked files. And yet, the mystery of the vanished stagecoach remained untouched, because some things were never meant to be solved easily. Rebecca Hale was no longer a graduate student. She was a historian without a department, a researcher without funding, a woman marked quietly as difficult. But she had learned something essential. Truth does not need permission. She began working alone. Freedom of Information Act requests, cross-referencing land deeds, mining permits that appeared and vanished within months, military exclusion zones that shifted without explanation. Patterns emerged again, always the same stretch of Nevada desert, always the same coordinates altered slightly as if to disguise repetition. She returned, older now, more cautious. This time she did not go alone. With her were a geologist, a sound engineer, and a retired military analyst who owed the government nothing anymore. They brought equipment no search party in the 1800s could have imagined: ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, audio capture devices designed to record frequencies below human hearing. The desert welcomed them with silence. Too much silence. The first anomaly appeared within minutes. The radar showed depth without matter, a void where stone should be. The geologist whispered, "That's not erosion." The sound engineer adjusted his headphones and went pale. "There's movement," he said, "but not motion." No one asked him to explain. At dusk, the temperature dropped sharply. Winds moved against themselves. Rebecca felt the same pressure she'd felt decades earlier, like standing at the edge of something unfinished. She placed a hand on the sand. It was warm, alive. That night, the equipment activated on its own. Recorders captured a low, rhythmic sound. Not wind, not machinery. Hooves. Slow, measured, endless. The retired analyst stared at the data. "This isn't natural," he said, "and it isn't accidental." He pulled out a folder he had never shared before. Inside were declassified memos from the 1950s, experiments, not with weapons, with space, attempts to understand areas where reality behaved differently. The government hadn't created those places, they had found them, and then exploited them. One memo referenced an uncontrolled civilian interaction event in the late 19th century. No details, just coordinates. Rebecca's hands shook. They matched. As dawn broke, the ground changed. A shallow outline appeared in the sand, the unmistakable shape of a stagecoach. Wheels, axle, bench, as if pressed upward from below. The team stood frozen. Then the outline faded, erased by a breeze that did not touch anything else. The sound engineer collapsed. He was crying. "I hear them," he said. "They're aware. They know time passed." No one mocked him. No one could. They packed up quickly, too quickly. As they drove away, Rebecca looked back. For a moment, just a moment, she saw movement, a coach cresting a rise. No horses, no driver, just momentum. Then, nothing. Within a week, their funding was cut. Their data was subpoenaed. The retired analyst's pension was reevaluated. Rebecca received an email containing only one sentence: "Some doors are not meant to be reopened." She replied with silence, but silence was no longer enough. She leaked everything: raw data, coordinates, memos, audio files of hooves that no animal made. The internet did what it always did. It argued, it doubted, it spread the story faster than anyone could stop it. Some called it a hoax, some called it proof. Families of the missing saw something else entirely: validation, grief given shape. Margaret Ellis's great-niece listened to the audio and wept. That's her. That's waiting. No scientist could explain what she meant, but everyone felt it. Public pressure mounted. Congress held hearings that led to nowhere. Agencies denied involvement. The desert remained closed for safety reasons. Rebecca Hale was warned again, this time openly. She refused to stop. She returned alone. No cameras, no equipment, just names written on paper. She stood at the edge of the void and read them aloud. Every passenger, every guard, every soul erased. The wind rose. The ground trembled. For the first time in over a century, something changed. A sound broke through. A single wheel turning, then another. A presence, not emerging, but acknowledging. She felt it then. Not vengeance, release. When she left, the desert was quiet again, but different, lighter. Months later, restricted zones were quietly lifted. Maps were updated. No explanation given, but something had closed. The stagecoach did not return, but the waiting ended. And sometimes, that is the closest thing to justice the world allows.
After Rebecca Hale read the names into the desert, the world did not change all at once. It changed the way guilt always does, quietly, relentlessly, from the inside out. Within a year, men who had once dismissed the vanished stagecoach as folklore began waking in the middle of the night with the same dream: a road that ended, a sky that bent downward, a sound of wheels rolling where no wheels should be. One former official, now a respected consultant, collapsed during a conference in Las Vegas. As he was carried out, witnesses swore he screamed a single word: return. His medical records listed exhaustion. No one believed that explanation. Old documents continued surfacing, not from leaks, from estates, from safety deposit boxes opened after deaths, from widows who found letters their husbands never mailed. Each fragment told the same story from a different angle. The chest had been ordered destroyed, not stolen, not rerouted, destroyed, because what it carried threatened to unmake careers, fortunes, and reputations built on bloodless language and buried bones. But the desert had refused the order. Eleanor Graves' name appeared again in one final place: a handwritten ledger discovered in a private collection in Santa Fe. Beside her name was a single sentence: witness retained until closure. No date, no signature, just inevitability. Indigenous leavers demanded formal acknowledgement, not of the supernatural, of the crime, of the land taken, of the deaths disguised, of the silence enforced. The government offered apologies without details. Communities demanded details without apology. The tension cracked something open. A marker was placed near the exclusion zone. It did not name the stagecoach. It did not explain the anomaly. It simply read, "In memory of those who were taken and never returned." Some visitors left flowers. Others left coins. A few claimed they heard a sound, soft, rhythmic, when they stood too close. Rebecca Hale withdrew from public life. She had done what she came to do. The rest belonged to time. But time, it seemed, was not finished. In 2019, a drought exposed land long hidden beneath sand and scrub. Hikers reported a strange sight. Wood, blackened but intact, shaped. Authorities arrived quickly. The site was sealed within hours. Official reports stated the remains were part of an unidentified transport vehicle. No further comment. But one photograph escaped. A wheel, iron-rimmed, 19th century. The photograph ignited everything again. Experts argued authenticity. Skeptics pointed to manipulation. But families of the missing did not argue. They recognized the shape, the curve, the truth. When excavation finally began under public pressure, it revealed something unsettling. The remains were incomplete. There was no frame, no interior, just fragments, as if the stagecoach had attempted to return and failed. The lead archaeologist resigned within weeks. His final interview included a sentence no one could explain. "We found evidence of departure, not impact." That night, the desert wind howled. Sensors across the region registered unusual vibrations. Nothing dangerous, nothing measurable, but something ended. Rebecca Hale watched the news from afar. She felt no triumph, only relief, the kind that comes after holding your breath for a century. The descendants of the passengers gathered privately months later. No cameras, no speeches, just names spoken aloud. For the first time, the names were answered with silence that felt complete. Not empty, complete. Some mysteries demand solutions. Others demand respect. The vanished stagecoach demanded remembrance. And somewhere, deep beneath Nevada sand, or perhaps beyond it, the road no longer waited. In the end, the Nevada desert did what it had always done. It kept the truth without forgiving the lie. Years after the final excavation, tourists still drove past the place without realizing what lay beneath their tires. There was no sign pointing the way, no plaque explaining the absence, just open land, sky stretched thin, and a silence that pressed gently against the chest. Those who knew slowed. Those who didn't passed through, and that was fitting, because the story of the vanished stagecoach was never meant to be shouted, it was meant to be felt. Rebecca Hale returned one last time before her health failed. No equipment, no notes, just memory. She stood where the outline had once appeared and closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt no resistance, no pressure, no echo. The place was empty in the way healed wounds are empty, not missing, not raw, simply closed. She whispered, "You're remembered." The wind did not answer, and that was the answer. History eventually accepted what it could not explain. Textbooks softened the language, museums avoided conclusions, but beneath every careful sentence lived an uncomfortable truth. Progress had demanded silence, power had demanded disappearance, and innocence had paid the price. The descendants carried forward something quieter than anger, awareness. They told their children not just what was taken, but why remembering mattered. They spoke of a teacher who never returned, of a gambler who ran from fear and found something far greater, of a prospector whose hope never reached home, of guards who followed duty into uncertainty, of a woman in black who refused to let the truth die alone. Eleanor Braves's name was finally spoken publicly during a land acknowledgement ceremony decades later. No explanation accompanied it, just recognition. And sometimes recognition is enough to release what has been waiting. The government never admitted fault, but policies changed, protections strengthened, files quietly opened. Not because of guilt, because of consequence. The desert had taught them that erased truths do not vanish, they accumulate, they wait. Travelers still report strange sensations along certain stretches of Nevada highway, a heaviness in the chest, a feeling of passing through something unseen, a momentary urge to look back. Most dismiss it, a few don't. No one ever recovered the gold, and perhaps that was the point. Gold had tempted, gold had corrupted, gold had tried to bury suffering beneath weight and value. The desert refused. The stagecoach never returned whole. It never should have. Its purpose was not to arrive. Its purpose was to remind that justice delayed does not disappear, that silence has a cost, that land remembers footsteps even when history erases names. In the American West, legends are often built on exaggeration. This one was built on absence, and absence, when examined closely, tells the truth more clearly than any artifact. The Nevada desert still stretches endlessly under the sun, still unforgiving, still beautiful, still honest. It does not choose sides, it does not judge, it simply keeps what it is given, and returns what must be returned when the time is right. Somewhere beyond maps and measurements, a road no longer waits. A journey has ended, and a story, long buried beneath sand, silence, and fear, has finally been told. If this untold mystery stayed with you, don't let it disappear. Follow and subscribe to Untold Golden History for more real stories history tried to erase.